Summer job cleaning units in a low-income housing condo complex. I got the job through the property manager, who I used to babysit for, and for a high school student, it paid surprisingly well. The job was simple. Whenever a tenant moved out, we would go in and clean the unit to prepare it for the next family. Many of the units had been abandoned in a hurry. Belongings were often left behind, and some places looked as if people had simply gotten up and left one day. I worked alongside a university student I'll call Jen. She was about 20 or 21 and naturally took the lead while I followed her direction. One day, we were assigned a unit on the end of a row. The layout becomes important, so I'll explain it briefly. When you entered through the front door, you walked into the living room. On the right side were two sets of stairs, one leading up to the second floor and one behind a door leading down to the basement. The basement stairs turned twice, meaning you couldn't see into the basement from the main floor. The basement itself was just one large unfinished concrete room with a washer, dryer, furnace, and a single hanging light bulb. There were no closets, side rooms, alcoves, or places to hide. When we entered the unit, it was obvious the previous tenants had left in a hurry. The kitchen was filthy, and most of their belongings were still there. We spent the first part of the afternoon packing everything into garbage bags and sorting items that could be donated. Once that was finished, we started cleaning. Part of the kitchen cleanup involved pulling the oven and fridge away from the walls and cleaning them thoroughly. We also removed the drawer underneath the oven. When it came time to put it back, we discovered the rails were damaged and it wouldn't slide in properly. For reasons that made sense at the time, Jen and I stood on opposite sides and kicked it until it wedged itself back underneath the oven. When we tried pulling it out again, it wouldn't budge. We both immediately regretted doing that, but we figured the property manager could deal with it later. After that, we split up. Jen headed upstairs to clean the bedrooms, while I stayed downstairs removing the glass light fixtures so I could wash them. I was standing on a ladder in the living room when I heard Jen call my name from upstairs. I called back, to no response. I climbed down and went upstairs. When I found Jen, she was cleaning a bedroom with headphones on. I asked what she wanted. She looked confused. "What, did you call me?" I said. She laughed and shook her head. "No." I shrugged it off and went back downstairs. One thing that always bothered me about that unit was the attic access above the staircase. It was just a square opening in the ceiling leading into a dark crawl space. The cover was missing, so every time I walked underneath it, I found myself looking up into a square of complete darkness. A few minutes later, I heard my name again. This time when I called back, Jen immediately yelled from upstairs, saying, "I didn't call you. You're hearing things." At the time, I agreed with her. It was strange, but I wasn't frightened. Not yet. A little while later, I was standing at the kitchen sink cleaning the light fixtures. I turned around to grab a fresh sponge and nearly tripped. The oven drawer was sitting halfway out on the floor. Immediately, I thought it was odd. Jen and I had practically kicked the thing into place. We'd also confirmed afterward that it was completely stuck. Still, I just kicked it back in. It took several hard kicks before it wedged itself under the oven again. To make sure, I grabbed the handle and pulled. Nothing. It was stuck. Satisfied, I went back to cleaning. A few minutes later, I turned around again and almost tripped. The drawer was back out. I hadn't heard anything. Nobody else was downstairs. This time, I felt genuinely unsettled. The drawer hadn't simply slid out. It had been jammed into place. I left it where it was and decided it was the property manager's problem. When I checked on Jen, she was still upstairs cleaning, so I returned to my own work. Eventually, I started reinstalling the clean light fixtures. Since it was a bright summer afternoon, I turned the lights off while I worked. I was standing on a small ladder trying to secure one of the fixtures when the light suddenly switched on. The sudden brightness startled me, and I fell backward on the ladder. A second later, the fixture slipped from my hands and came crashing down. It narrowly missed hitting me in the head. For a few seconds, I just sat there on the floor. I could see the light switch from where I had fallen. Nobody was near it. At the same time, I could clearly hear Jen moving around upstairs. Only a few seconds had passed. There was no possible way she could have run downstairs, turned on the light, and gotten back upstairs. The switch had somehow turned on by itself. At least that's what it looked like. I still wasn't thinking about ghosts or anything supernatural. I was just uncomfortable. At that point, I decided I was done working alone and went upstairs to find Jen. When I told her what happened, she looked uneasy. Then she told me something I hadn't expected. A few minutes earlier, she thought she'd heard someone call her name too. It didn't sound like me. We were both officially creeped out. The only task left was sweeping the basement. Neither of us wanted to go down there alone, so we went together. The basement was exactly as I described earlier, one large open concrete room with nowhere to hide. While Jen swept, I sat on the dryer and talked with her. A few minutes later, we finished and headed back upstairs. We were relieved to be almost done. We started gathering our supplies in the living room. I was standing maybe 2 feet from the open basement door when it happened. From below us came the unmistakable sound of heavy footsteps. Both of us froze. The footsteps were loud enough that neither of us questioned what we were hearing. Then came something far worse. The footsteps suddenly broke into a run. They were charging up the stairs, fast and loud, coming directly toward us. The footsteps got louder. I looked at Jen, and her face had gone completely white. Neither of us said a word. Running on pure instinct, I grabbed the basement door and slammed it shut as hard as I could. Then Jen and I ran. We flew out the front door and across the lawn. At one point, I heard Jen yell behind me, "The key!" I yelled back, "Leave it." Neither of us stopped until we were on the other side of the complex. I barely remember what happened afterward. Eventually, we returned to the property manager and told her someone had been inside the unit. We left our cleaning supplies behind and never went back. As far as I know, she contacted the police before anyone entered the condo. We never told her what we had actually experienced. What could we say? That something invisible had spent the entire afternoon calling our names, moving objects around, turning lights on, and finally charging up the basement stairs? It sounded ridiculous. Even now, I'm not someone who believes every strange story is paranormal. I've had other experiences in my life that could probably be explained one way or another. This one is different, though. Maybe we imagined hearing our names. Maybe there was some mechanical explanation for the oven drawer. Maybe the light switch malfunctioned. But that basement was empty. There was nowhere for anybody to hide. And those footsteps weren't distant or ambiguous. They sounded exactly like someone running up a staircase directly toward us. Even now, more than 20 years later, hearing someone run up a set of stairs sends me right back to that summer afternoon. I'm still a skeptic, but I never have been able to explain what happened in that condo.